All right. Well, hello, everyone. As you can see, it's still a bit dark here, so good morning from my end of the world. I'll take the next, well, probably 45 minutes to give you an overview of all the new features that are coming with Connection 7. So we called it the Connections Deep Dive, and what I'm going to do is I'll have a number of slides and interwoven a number of pre-recorded demos. I felt this would be better for this type of format, to have little snippets of the new capabilities to show you what each of the new feature looks like. So I'll be going through that, and I will monitor the questions, but probably answer them later and not while I'm speaking. That will be a little tough with the Q&A. So again, hello, and let's get going. First of all, oops, wrong window. There we go. A quick shout out to the sponsors again here of this event. And of course, I want to start with giving you a quick agenda overview of the things that we're going to cover here. So first off, I'll talk about the tailored experience. You've heard us use that phrase tailored experience for a while now. I think we started with 6.0. And the whole point is giving end users a capability to create an experience for their communities, for their project teams, etc., groups of people, to build an environment in a community that fits their purpose, right? So tailored experience is always synonymous with community. And there are a couple of exciting things that we're adding in Connection 7 that make that so much easier and more effective and more engaging. The second big topic is around the various support points for the Microsoft ecosystem, Microsoft 365. So I'll show you how the Teams integration will look like, the new version of the Outlook integration, the SharePoint integration into Community, and aspects of Office for round-trip editing. And I'll just have to move a window a little bit here. I hope that didn't disturb the share. Okay. And then lastly, I'll spend a quick moment to talk about Cloud Native for the component pack, but there'll be a little bit more detail on that particular topic tomorrow, so I'll keep that fairly brief. Okay. I will have to show you the legal stuff here, especially since a lot of the demo shows versions of what the product looks like today. We're still in active development. I'll highlight a few things here and there where I know that things already look different or will look different next week when we update the preview environment. So you'll notice a couple of changes here and there still to come between now and general availability. So therefore, what you see today might not always exactly look like what will be in GA, which is a good thing, because we'll continuously improve between now and then. All right. So let's get started with tailored experience. Everything around the tailored experience workstream is about helping end users save time and achieve better outcomes by building better communities faster, right? That's kind of the tagline. What is it that we're doing here? And I divided this up into 3 sections. There are really 3 areas that we tackled this time with Connection 7. There's something that we call the wizard to help you create step-by-step new communities. We are introducing templates, finally, that allow you to create communities faster and even push content into the new communities. And we have updates to highlights, which I'll talk about in more detail a little later on. There are a couple of interesting points here that I want to make sure everybody walks away with. So let's dive in with the wizard. The creation wizard takes that very first step when you create a community to help users capture the essential parts of creating the community and doing it very quickly. So it's literally somebody taking you by the hand and walking you through the first steps of creating a community. We have a completely new look and feel for this part of the process. And for the first time ever, The entire process is now fully supported on mobile devices. So for now, it runs on the tablet. We're still working on scaling it down to work on a phone. But up to this point, you've never been really able to get to the finer points of creating a community. We introduced the capability to create a community real quick on your phone or your tablet before, but you couldn't really make a lot of adjustments. Now, this entire wizard is available on your tablet today, phones coming later, and you can walk through it and create a community right from your mobile device. So that's a big step forward. Okay, so this is one of the recorded demos that I was mentioning. So let's walk through the process of what it looks like when we actually create a community. As you can see, I'm doing this on the tablet. So here I'm on my iPad. I'm looking at the community catalog, and I click the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner, and this now starts the actual wizard. This is the first step. I can provide a name, I can provide a description, I can set whether the community is public or private. I can then click next, but hold on, there's a red exclamation mark in the upper left-hand corner. So I go back because I forgot to type in the name. That's a required field, so that's how that's indicated. And sorry, that was a bit fast, but I hope you got it. And then here in the next step, I can select a template. I can select from the pre-approved templates. I can filter by name. So here's one called Max Service. In the next step, I can then add users to the community. I'm choosing Mickey here. I can make him a member or an owner. But on second thought, I'll think it's probably better if he does not have access. So I can remove him again. In the next step, I can tag the community. I'll tag it with leaders. And I can then define a URL suffix here on what the full URL to the community will be. I call it Southwest Leaders. I click the create button, and now in the background, the new community will be deployed. And as you can see, it is not empty. That's the big difference now. We now have a community that is showing pre-populated content in the community. I'm scrolling down here because I want to get to this section here where you see a forum, right? There's already a forum thread in there with responses. So this can all be deployed into a community together with, for example, files, any sort of content that you would actually like to have within your community. So here we have files that were pre-filled. I'm now switching to the browser to give you a quick look at what it looks like here. So there is the new community with a description. And as I go into it, you see that it's of course the same community, but now we have the responsive design coming through. Since we're in a browser with a bit more real estate, we now have a 3-column layout that on the iPad, if you noticed, was scaled down to a single column layout. And just to check whether the content's in the browser as well, yes, it is. So here we see the files that have been pre-populated into the community. So let me spend a moment on this particular point. This is really key, and that was one of the requirements that we heard from a number of customers who run repeatable projects, right? So if you run projects that are similar, and with every new project, you start out with the same set of best practices, standard operating procedures, or just basically content that you need for every project, you can now simply create a template with all that content in there, and that will then be pushed out to the new community as you start the project. Okay. So that was the wizard. And I already showed you the concept of the template here. So I'll just have 2 more slides to have an opportunity to highlight things that I think are important. So what is populated with the template? It's the layout, which is on the highlights page, what it looks like, how many columns, what widgets, and therefore what applications are being pushed into the community, right? You might have certain applications that you want for a particular type of community and other applications for other type of communities. And of course, as I mentioned a few times already, content is being pushed into the community as well. So how do you actually create and manage those templates? That's something that I can't show you in the demo yet. We're still working on that part, but should be pushed out. I'm not sure if we get that to the preview environment, but what you'll see coming is a management environment for the templates. What we decided is that we don't necessarily want everybody just to create templates willy-nilly. There needs to be some governing function that approves templates so the template catalog doesn't grow out of hand. So we are building a template manager console. People can build communities and then request to have those communities to be converted into templates, which then show up in that template picker that you saw in the quick demo. So that's the aspect of staying in control the amount of templates, and that you don't have redundant templates. And of course, the whole point is for the users, the community owners, to save time and also to create repeatable success, because you can now start every project with this pre-built set of content. So next up are updates to highlights. There are a couple of important changes here that I just want to address right away. So we introduced highlights, I think, with connection 6 CR3 or 4. And you saw that at the time, the highlights page based on Engagement Center was there, but at the same time, you still have the old overview page. So we always felt that that leads to a potential conflict, but there was no quick way to solve that. So now with connection 7, highlights will be the default community landing page, and the overview page, the old community landing page, if you will automatically be hidden. There are a couple of things that result out of that. For example, how you add apps and etc. But that's the first line here under the updated highlights experience. What we will now be able to do is show apps, the traditional connections apps like blog, wiki, file, etc., next to the widgets that you know from highlights or the engagement center. So you can bring them into the highlights page, one page where these two are displayed side by side. We worked on how you actually create the layout. So that is getting easier. And of course, as always, one of the big advantages of the highlights environment is that you can aggregate content from multiple communities. And I'll show you that in the demo. So maybe we'll just go ahead and look at what we have done here. So here I am in a pretty basic bare bone community called Long Beach City. I am looking at the highlights page. Here I still have the overview, but that will then be hidden. If you click on customize, we have this new palette that shows you all the widgets. There's already a newer version that we push next week to the preview, where we are actually separating out the old widgets from the overview page for that familiarity. If you want to add simple files app, you can do that. So you'll see a change here in this particular area, but I just decided to add a media library to my landing page, and it's all automatically pulling images from this community. So here in the content sources where I configure this media gallery widget, it's showing me that I'm pulling images from the community that I'm in, Long Beach City. I can change the name of that widget, of course, so I'll just call it Places to See. And then there are a couple of other options that I could do, but I'll click Save. And now I have the community with an additional widget. I can also change the layout. So if I feel that the 3-column layout below the banner is not good, I want a 2-column layout, I can easily change that. So here we are. Very straightforward. But there are more configuration options, and that's the big difference between the highlights widgets and the old overview widgets. I can actually provide additional configuration. So here we have the files widget showing one channel, all the files from the Long Beach City community. But I can add a second channel that will then bring in files from another community. So let's just use the one we just created, Southwest Leaders. It is now adding another tab. So I can now also access files from another community, granted that I have the permission to do that. There are some display settings that I can choose. So I can, if you look at the files now, you can see more information about the file, and I can even add a search bar at the top of the widget. You can change the sort order, updated, shared by name, etc. So this function right now on the screen is not exactly necessarily new, so that was always part of highlights, but I think it's now all a bit more easy to use and straightforward. And like I said, there are going to be additional changes that you see between now and GA that we're already almost done with. But this is what highlights looks like. Quick overview. So now let's get to the third part of the tailored experience. Oh, actually, we're already on to the Microsoft ecosystem. So as a recap, we had the wizard, we have the templates, and we have the highlights updates. All of this together is really designed, again, to make the creation of a community easier, faster, more consistent, to create more engaging communities. I hope this will, address or a lot of the requirements that we've gotten around communities, and I hope especially around templates that we're helping our customers out quite a bit here. There was one thing I wanted to mention on the templates. Based on how connections works and the layout of the pages, etc., templates only work in the moment where you create the community, right? I assume that's a question that a lot of you might be thinking about. Once the community is created, you cannot change a template anymore, right? Because if I were to change the template and then maybe 50 communities that were created using the template would automatically be updated, that would be quite a disservice to the community owners who might have tweaked their community already after creating the community with the initial template. So we made a decision not to do that. The community is created with a template, the content is pushed out, the layout, etc. But once the community is deployed, the template will not then apply a new skin like you might, be familiar with some other apps where that's possible. Okay, so that was tailored experience. Now let's talk about the Microsoft 365 ecosystem support. So what we're doing here is basically building a bridge between connections and Microsoft 365. And we, this time, picked 4 areas that we're addressing. So we're going to introduce for the first time ever integration into Teams. We have a completely new integration into Outlook. We are continuing the SharePoint support. So you'll now see the SharePoint integration in the community being back again. And then we have round trip editing in Office. So those are the 4 main areas. And I'll walk you through this now step by step, starting with Teams. Teams in itself also has, at this point, 4 integration points. Teams and connections, there are a lot of areas where an integration makes sense. You can bring Teams into connections. You can bring connections into Teams. You can have simple things like initiate a chat from somebody's profile card, etc. One thing that I want to put out here is that these 4 use cases that I'm going to show you now are the ones that we can build today based on publicly available and generally released APIs on the Teams environment. We have additional integration points that we already built that go beyond these 4 use cases, but we can't release them yet because the APIs underneath that we leverage here from Teams are still in beta, and therefore we can't really release those features. But just to give you an idea, things like synchronizing the membership. If you link a community with a particular team channel, you can then add a person to the community and that person will automatically be added to that Teams channel. That is all possible. But again, we might have to wait a few more months before we GA that until that API that we're leveraging is out of beta. Right, so that was a quick introduction. Now let's walk through the 4 integration points. And let's start with the one-to-one chat. So one-to-one, really straightforward. You basically are in Connections. So the first two start from Connections. You're in Connections. And for example, you are on somebody's profile page like Lucy here, and you see the chat icon that we always had. So it can invoke a same-time chat, but if you set up your environment to use Teams, if you click the chat button, the chat will open up. So let's have a look at that. So here I am on Orient Me, and there is a blog that I created, and Lucy left a comment. So I can hover over the name, see her profile card, and click on the chat text at the bottom of the profile card, which will then open up the Teams chat window. I chose to use the one in the browser here rather than the locally installed client. But as you can see, really straightforward, right? It took me straight from her profile card into the Teams chat one-to-one, and I can chat with her. I can also do this by clicking on the Important to Me bubble up there. So that's the Important to Me bar with her bubble. I can also click on her full name to get to the profile page. And again, there's the chat button. If I click on that, we'll see the same thing happening where then Teams opens up and I can start chatting away. Straightforward. Next up is the capability to, again, start in Connections, but this time take any page that you're on in Connections and share that into a team or a channel. So right now you see that up on this screenshot here, we have this little chat icon here. This is not how we're going to do it in GA, so that will be updated, I think, also next week on the preview server, where we'll actually have a Teams icon here right next to the search icon. So that location will change a little bit to kind of hint that if you're starting a channel chat sharing the page you're on is context sensitive, which means if you click it, it will take the URL of the page you're looking at and then post it into the channel where you can then type an additional message next to the link that will allow users to go from Teams back into Connections to see whatever you shared there. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So we are again on Lucy's profile page. I am logged in as Felix Adams here. I'm looking at her page and I want to share that with the particular channel. And in this case, it's the travel channel from the travel team. And as I clicked the share button, it took Lucy Suarez's profile and the link, and I can type in some additional text addressing the fact that Lucy is going to join our team and welcoming her to the actual project, the community. So here now you see the same thing in the Teams channel where all the people in that channel, all the community members will see that post that I just put in there, and they can follow the link, get back to Lucy's profile page and leave a comment here right on her board. Right, so you see that seamless bridge from Connections into Teams and back, so you can easily share, depending on what side you're working on this moment, with your broader team, your community, your members, etc. So that was the second one where we started out in Connections. Now let's have a look at the part where we actually start out in Teams and then share something from there. So the third integration point is called the messaging extension. With the messaging extension, we are now in Teams. I already have a chat open. Maybe I'm in a channel and I want to quickly share either a file or maybe a community that I was in or a wiki, etc. It doesn't matter. I can click on the connections icon at the bottom and then see a list of the recent history of things that I looked at. So I have the bucket list is actually, I think, a wiki page. The Sons of Gardens is a community, etc. But then you also see the Files tab up on top, where I can navigate through my files, I can see files that have been recently shared with me, etc. And I can then share that back to the Teams chat right there. Really straightforward. And it, again, works both in channels as well as in one-to-one or group chats. So let's have a look at that. There we go. So here I am again in Teams, and you notice at the bottom there was the connections icon. If I click on it, a window comes up, and this will also look slightly different. So this is not the final version, but the functionality is there, where I can see the recent history. I can switch over to files, and there you see the ability for me to select from my files, pinned files, shared with me. There's one that was shared with me, but I'm still not finding the file I need. So I can also filter. So there's the community called Car Expo 2020. And this is what I can now select. And it's now shared into that channel with a little card that allows me to click on the content and see it in the page. So I can leave an additional message, hit the share button, and now everybody in that channel sees the card, can click on it, and it will then direct them straight to the Car Expo 2020 community. So I think this is worth calling out, that we didn't limit this capability with the messaging extension to strictly files, because that's what everybody would presumably assume, right? Typically, you want to share files, but no, it goes beyond that. You can basically share all of the recent content that you've seen in connections lately and just push it out to that conversation. So that is the messaging extension. Now let's have a look at the fourth area currently of the Connections Teams integration. This is the ability to bring Connections content, entire community apps, into the Teams environment. So I said earlier that we can working on linking a community directly with a channel. And that is really ideally where we end up, where a community and a channel are linked to the point where you create a community to run a project, but you want to bring the persistent chat capability into that community. So these are linked in terms of the membership. The same people are on both fronts. And it almost doesn't matter whether you're going into the community and you can see the Teams chat. Another example where the API isn't public yet, so it's running, but we can't publish yet. Or you can go into the Teams channel and then see the more persistent content, if you will, coming from your Connections community, your files, your wikis, your forums, etc. Right? So this will be really interesting once we can publish all that advanced capability. But what we can do today already is add most of the community apps to a channel. So it applies today to files, wikis, blog, the forum, recent updates, and highlights. So that's the list of the 6 apps we can add today. And let me just show you what this will look like. And if I look down to the left corner, that's me turning on my phone to find out how much time I have left. Hope that's not too distracting. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and see what this part of the integration looks like. So here we are, again, in a Teams channel. And I think this is pretty quick at the beginning. So you see up there, there's a travel wikis. If I click on it, this is now a wiki coming live from the community that's linked to this chat. It's the Travel Channel community. I can go in there and it's fully interactive. I can even create a new page. So this is great for when you actually use this during meetings to take meeting minutes, right? Or you want to document something real quick. You can do that right from within Teams, but it is all within that linked connections community. There's another example where you can go to files. So here's the list of community files, and of course you can switch between the thumbnail view, the list view, etc. And you can navigate through the community files. You can get to the folders. So there is a folder called Inspiration with a bunch of pictures. So all of this works with ones that I've already selected. But what if I want to add a new one? I go to Add App, select the Connections app, and then the next step, I'll define what community I want this to come from. Travel community, and then I can select the apps. And there you saw all the different apps. I can give this particular blog that I want to add now a name. So I'll call it Travel Blog. I save it. And now this blog will be added to the page, and there we go. So here I have my blog now within my Teams channel for everyone in that Teams channel to visit. So here's another example of a forum, right? This is what a forum will look like. And then the last example is the recent updates. So this is the activity stream of the community. So if you just want to see real quick what's going on in the community within Teams, you're there. You can get a quick glance of what happened in the community. Okay, like I said, you see at the bottom, design subject to change. There are a couple of things here that are still going to be tweaked, right? So don't get hung up over that big arrow up here, which is, that's not the final version. But this is the functionality. This is what it's going to look like. Okay. Next up is the Outlook integration. And you might be wondering, well, wait a second, isn't that something that you already have? Well, yes. But the existing Outlook integration was based on an older implementation approach that Microsoft is not really supporting that much anymore. So that, together with a number of other reasons, led us to the decision that we have to rebuild the Outlook integration from the ground up. So this is completely new. This is not the old one. This is really next generation, built independently of the previous one. There is one enormous benefit to this, as this is using the newly, or the current standard from Microsoft on how to integrate with their Office suite. This allows us to not only bring this Outlook integration to Windows machines as the old one that really only worked as a plugin on a Windows desktop. This now also works on a Mac, and it even works if you're using the browser-based Outlook client, right? So that in itself is a huge advantage in that now actually more users can use the Outlook integration with connections regardless of what Outlook client they're using. So what's the point of this integration? To me, it's a lot about reducing clutter and making information available to a broader audience. So the first thing you can do is you can actually take an email that you received and store the entire email, maybe as a file. Maybe you want to save it as a knowledge article in a wiki, or post a status update, or save it as part of an activity. You can do that. You can save the entire email or just the attachment, right? If you just received a PDF in an email, you can take that email and store it as a file in your file, your community file. The other use case is the other way around, where you actually want to send an email and you want to include a file with that email. Now, the bad way to do it is to attach an entire file. We all know that's bad, because then you have, clogging up inboxes and having all these different files floating out there without any control over who has the latest version and what's the latest version of the truth, etc. So instead, you can compose an email and send a link to a connections file based on the share by link feature that we introduced a while ago. But of course, you have options. If you really want to send it as an attachment because somebody really doesn't have access to the connections environment, you can still do that. And like I said, the other option you have is now supporting it on Mac, PC, or in your browser. So here's a quick list of the different more detailed features. So for files, like I said, you can save the entire email as an EML file. You can save only the attachments. The sharing is configurable, and you can upload files to My Files or Community. You can actually post something as a status update. So everything I say that's on the left, you actually see on the screenshot on the far right, where I'm looking at the email from Let'sConnect, and you can see I can upload that email to files, activities, wikis, and status. Okay. On the activities, the cool thing is that as you upload it, you can actually also assign a to-do and set a due date. So let's take a look. Here we are in Outlook, and I'm looking at this email. I click the connections icon in the upper right-hand corner, and I decided to go with an activity. I want to create this as a to-do in an activity. So I can search activities, or I can filter by communities. So there are two ways to find the right activity that you want to go for. I want to go with this one, and I want to push it into section 9 and select the attachment, create as a to-do, select the date. I'm going to skip the assign to, but I could do that here as well. Again, this is not the final version. The icon will look better, right? But it now took this email and saved it as a to-do in my activity. So here's that activity that I just uploaded to, and I'll go to the recent updates view to find it quickly, and there it is. There's the PDF. There's my Hertz confirmation for my car rental, and I can now mark this action as complete. There we go. Now we're looking at the other use case where I'm composing an email to Sashi, and I want to send something that we need to work on. So I click on the add file. You also can see upload file from your local drive. I can add recipients. As I click add file, I can now select, do I want it from my files, community files, pinned files, shared with me, etc., all the different files views. So I'll stay with my files, and I know the name. It starts with 360. So I can filter, and there it is, 360-degree feedback. I can select the file. You can add multiple files. But you see that Sachi doesn't have access to the file. There's a warning. It's a private file, but I can now create a share link. Again, that's based on the share by link that we added a while ago. And now this card is added to the email with a link to that individual file, and I can send this off. What I can also do is go to add recipients there if I want to add additional people from connections, so I can start searching. I'm not going through that here, but that's another way to add recipients to an email as you compose it. Okay, so that was the Outlook integration. I am showing it to you here in the Outlook client on a Mac. So that in itself is new and yay, awesome. But again, this works the same way in a browser if you decide to do that, and of course on Windows. Good. Now let's take a look at the SharePoint integration. The SharePoint integration is allowing you to bring SharePoint libraries in particular. So it's a very focused integration point of bringing SharePoint libraries into a community. So you'll have that single point of access starting in the community, but you have a list of documents somewhere in a SharePoint site. You can bring that into SharePoint, and you can do it in two ways. You can have a widget on the highlights page, or you can have a full page view to get to that library. So let's take a look. Here we are in the travel destinations community. This is on the preview server, so you can actually play with that yourself. And here is a SharePoint library widget on that landing page of the community. And I can see files, I can see folders, I can filter. It updates the list of documents right here. I can jump into folders, etc. And I can also decide to go maybe to that library in SharePoint. So there's a click available if I want to do that. That is available, opens up as a new window or tab, and I can switch over. One other thing that's nice is if you have a file and you want to make a quick change, you can click on the name of the file, and you see that it's opening up in the editor in Word here, and I just can, make some few spelling errors to be checked and changed. But now we're back in the community after making those quick changes. And I want to show you what this page also looks like in the full page view. So like I said, this was the widget. Now in the navigation, I can go to the full view. And here we are in Connections looking at the same SharePoint library where I can select multiple files to download. I can navigate through the folders, but you see the Add button up there, the blue one that looks just like in Connections files. Of course, you can also upload files or folders to that library, which will then be displayed here in this context. Okay, so that was the SharePoint library. And now one more thing, I don't have a recorded version of that, so I'll talk to it. This is now addressing the capability to use round-trip editing with Microsoft Office on your desktop. So that's something that we brought back. The plugin has to be installed for that to work. But what you'll be able to do is in the Connections file viewer, which is what you see on this screenshot, you have the upload button. And if you click on the twisty downward, you'll actually see edit in Microsoft Office, and then it will open up your locally installed Word, PowerPoint, Excel, whatever you're using for this file. And you can make your changes, and as you close it, it will then automatically take that updated file and upload it to Connections as a new version. So this is not necessarily a net new capability, right? We had this as part of the desktop plugin, but the support for it lapsed, and it was not tested on more recent versions of Connections. So this is the reason I'm bringing it up here, because we continue to get requests for it. So what you'll see us do is bring back the support for the round-trip editing. It's currently not working. I'll just put it out there. For your Microsoft 365 online editors, because there are a couple of additional steps that are for on-prem installations of Connections are really hard to navigate. So we haven't cracked that nut yet. But if you have a locally installed version of Office, that will work just fine. Okay, I'm getting a little tight on time here, so let's go quickly. The next area that I want to address is the export to PDF. Export to PDF is a great way to take to take Connections content. You see that at the bottom, it works in activities, wikis, blogs, ideation blog, and a forum, where you can actually take that content, maybe the wiki page, and export it to a PDF. So you can print it without the header, site navigation, footer of that page. Or you can archive it, or maybe share it, right? So it's very content focused because it gets rid of the clutter of the entire navigation header and footer bar. And you can apply templates to make it look good. And it's also something that the community owner can actually turn on or off for their respective community, because there might be some communities where you don't want that because you're worried about, content getting out too easily out of the community. So you can turn that off on a community basis. And it does work not only in the desktop browser, it also works natively in the Connections mobile app. So let's have a look. Back again in our favorite community, travel destinations. And I'm here, and I will actually start off on a wiki. I'll go to the wiki that we have in here. And here's the bucket list page again. Beautiful pictures, places we all want to go to. But if I were to print that in the browser now, it would look horrible, right? Because you have all this extra information. There's a little icon that's right now a printer that will be updated to say PDF. And then we start with the export as PDF dialog. So on this page, I can select, well, do I want to export the entire wiki or just this bucket list page? So I select just bucket list, and I can, let me pause here because I think it's going too quick. just the bucket list page, and I turn off the title page, table of contents page. So remember fax machines when you used to add a title page before sending the entire fax? Well, that was a long time ago, but you can do the same thing here, where you can have a title page, table of contents to be generated, to be printed as well. I'm turning that off. I just want the actual pages. And now I click Generate PDF. It's now taking the page, stripping all the surrounding areas, applying the template, and previewing it here to me. So that beautiful page now is a perfectly designed PDF page that I can easily share or archive or whatever I want to do with it. So I can download it, or I can send it off to the printer. In my case, it's a laser printer, so it's black and white. Here's the preview, and off you go. Beautiful. Now let's do the same thing on an iPad, same community, but now I'm actually going to a blog. Yep.
Can you wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm wrapping it up. We're
great.
at the end. So we're now here. I can like the page, and I can also then click the export button. There it is. And as you see, we now have the PDF ready to go. Okay, last slide, 45 minutes, perfect. The one last thing I want to mention is that for the component pack, we're adding Amazon EKS and Red Hat OpenShift support. So that's part of the initiative of us lowering the total cost of ownership of the component pack and making it easier to deploy. There's more on that tomorrow, so see this as a little teaser for tomorrow. And with that, that's my part of the presentation. One has already hit me on the head, so
thank you very much, Rene.
And
Thanks
back to you, Wannes.
That was great.